Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of your Introductions to Ethics course. Hope you guys have been enjoying it so far. I really enjoyed a lot of y'all's really thoughtful comments. This week, we're going to be talking about ethical relativism. And maybe you guys have heard this kind of phrase or this idea before, maybe that ethics is relative or ethics is subjective. And a lot of times when people say that, they're really what they mean is that ethics, is different for each person. They have different moral values depending on their experiences, their circumstances, their culture, et cetera, et cetera. And that seems true, right? My moral values are probably different than yours because of my background, because of the things that I've encountered and experienced in particular. However, that's really just a descriptive claim, isn't it? That's really just a claim about how things are. Um, uh, there is another side of ethical relativism that is going to be making a prescriptive claim about how things should be or how we should evaluate. Most ethical relativists would agree that there are no sort of universal moral values with which we can evaluate morals. So anyway, before we get all into the nitty gritty, let's kind of define ethical relativism. Ethical relativism really is broadly the belief that there are no universal moral values. That is to say, there's no objective values that we can find which apply to everybody at all times, in all places, in all circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. However, there's differences between ethical or moral relativists. There's differences between how they think we have moral values, because obviously most of them believe we do have moral values, but what are those moral values? Where do they come from? And what should we do since we know that we can't objectively find or have moral values? What should we then do? And ethical relativists disagree about that. So first, we're going to start off with this sort of descriptive relativism that your book goes over in chapter 3 on page 31 in the 8th edition. So descriptive relativism is really just what we've been kind of talking about. It's a descriptive claim, right? You're saying when you make this claim that different cultures have, or different people have, different moral values. And that seems true. That seems kind of commonsensical. So the next kind of step in this is the normative or the evaluative claim that there are no moral values, right? That we have no means of evaluating. That's not a real thing, right? So you can believe in descriptive relativism. You can believe that different cultures and different individuals have different values, and that these different values come from different experiences and whatnot. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to believe that there are no universal moral values, right? An ethical relativist, a normative ethical relativist, would believe that there are no universal moral values. So another sort of kind of key difference between relativists, ethical relativists, is where does people's sense of moral values come from, right? Or where do moral values come from in general? Individualists or individual relativists would say that each individual has their own unique set of moral values. And maybe they've been kind of influenced by others, but for the most part, since we can't really know each other, since I can't really see inside you, see your intentions, see your principles, maybe we can discuss them or whatever. And since I've had my own experiences and whatnot, everybody's moral values, literally everyone's, are different and unique. A cultural relativist would say, no, maybe not everybody's values are unique. Rather, our values are shaped by our wider culture, by the wider structures around us. Our values are shaped by what is normal. And what is normal just means what everybody else, including me, is doing. So it automatically includes culture, right? So that's kind of one of the big differences between ethical relativists as well. So a lot of people really subscribe to ethical relativism in this day and age, especially. If you ask people about ethics, they usually will just say, oh yeah, like that's people's opinions. And a lot of you even said in your comments, right, what is right and wrong is kind of up for not only debate, but I really don't think I can tell you what you should do, right? And that's really kind of an ethical relativist sort of stance, right? And a lot of ethical relativists point to a couple of things. Actually, your book identifies 4, and we're going to go over those, but it identifies 4 things. And a lot of you identified this in your comments already too, right? The first one is that there's a whole lot of moral views and values out there. If something was, if there was an objective moral value, why isn't it more obvious? Where is it? Why haven't we captured it yet, right? Um, why are we still debating this thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? The next one is that we want to be tolerant and open-minded towards other people's values, right? We don't want to think that we have the truth, that we have the right and correct moral values, even if we're using them, right? Maybe they're just the most right and the most correct that we've found so far, right? Um, but we don't want to be so arrogant as to think that we have the correct moral values, because if we do that, then we lose out. We miss out on the potentially correct moral values, right? Because we won't see them when they arrive. Um, Another one is just, in general, this book kind of identifies moral uncertainty, meaning that it's really hard to know. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of different moral values and all that stuff, but on top of that, it's really hard to know if you're following your moral values, if you're applying them correctly, if you have the right ones. Morality is difficult. It's hard to know if you're doing the right thing, even if you have the correct moral principles, right? And lastly, circumstance and situational differences, right? What might be right for me in my particular circumstances and my relationships with people, et cetera, may not be right for you. It's really hard to find a universal principle to apply to everybody for all of time and all of space, right? That's difficult. So those are some things that you guys pointed out, but the book points out as well, that really lend themselves to ethical relativism in general, right? Um, it's pretty hard not to see ethical relativism as the truth with these things in mind. Um, so some potential alternatives to ethical relativism are, well, obviously religion. We talked about that. If you're religious, you can't really be a relativist, right? It seems like you have an objective source of moral values. But what the book identifies is called moral realism. And anybody who believes that there are sort of quote unquote objective values is a moral realist. You don't have to be theistic. You don't have to believe in a god or gods in order to be a moral realist. Perhaps you believe there are other ways to come to ethical values, maybe using reason and rationality, looking at the outcome, intentions, et cetera, et cetera. If you are looking at intentions, if you're looking at the outcome, things like that, then you're also not really an ethical relativist, are you? Right? You think there is a way that we can come to moral values. There's a way that we can evaluate. So all of those people who believe in objective moral values are moral realists. Another thing is moral pluralism that your book talks about. And these are really moral realists as well, right? Not only do these people believe that morals are real, they also believe that potentially there's more than one moral value. And I've been kind of alluding to this the whole time, right? So those are some potential alternatives, different ways of viewing things other than ethical relativism. We already talked a little bit about the religious side. We're also going to look at some different secular views now in the coming weeks, different ways to maybe find objective values that we can apply to our ethics. So yeah.